On today's episode of Hustle and Pro, we welcome University of North Texas's Vice President and Director of Athletics, Wren Baker. Hello and welcome, Wren.
Well, thank you for having me. It's good to join you. It's a beautiful day, and hopefully things are all continue to look up and improve in the middle of this pandemic. So it's fun to be with you today.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk to you. So first, I have a few quick hits to sort of just quickly get to know you and your sports background a little bit better. Who would you say is your favorite athlete, like of all time?
Karl Malone.
Oh, that was a fast one. Okay, then this might answer the next question. What's your favorite sport to watch?
That's a great question. I have a background in college basketball. I coached for a few years, and so there's aspects of the game of basketball that I enjoy to watch the most.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, I always say there's happiness and ignorance, and so I probably do a little more coaching inside my head for basketball. So I'm going to say football would be my favorite to watch.
Okay.
And then but basketball is the one that I probably analyze and break down the most.
Yeah, you probably watch that with a little more intensity or different focus.
That's right.
What about your favorite sport to play yourself?
Definitely basketball. And I played everything growing up. I grew up in a small town of about 900 people. And so there were lots of opportunities to get involved in anything you wanted to get involved in.
Yeah.
And, but, I think, and I probably was better at both baseball and football. But basketball was always kind of where my heart was. And so to this day, I still like to hoop a little bit, and I'm probably as good of a screener and fouler as there is anywhere.
Wow. Okay. So where'd you grow up? What small town or what area are you from?
Valiant, Oklahoma. It's in the far southeast corner of the state, and a lot of people in the DFW area will have been to Broken Bow Lake or at least heard about it. And
Sure.
So I grew up about 25 minutes from there, same county.
Okay, gotcha. So that was small enough where, like you said, you could play anything, even through high school. Probably you were able to.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you could, be in the vocal music. You want to be in a play. What they needed bodies for everything. So you got to be a part of a lot of things. That's one of the advantages of growing up in a small town.
Yep.
So we were all very active. There wasn't much else to do besides school activities. So a lot of my friends and we did stuff together every single day because of that.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, last quick hit. What's your favorite sports movie?
Jerry Maguire. I've probably seen Jerry Maguire 30 or 40 times.
Oh my gosh, we watched it over this last weekend, and I was supposed to leave the house to go, I don't know, grocery or something, and I couldn't leave because I kept going back in there to watch a few more minutes. It's just so good. I didn't realize how much I was saying out loud, trying to quote along with it. It's so great. I love that movie.
I love that movie. I think I don't remember exactly when it came out, but I think I was in high school.
Yeah.
And, it's a great movie.
Yes, it is. I know. The Rod Tidwell scene and everything. Anyway, we could go on. Okay. So via the power of Zoom meetings, I have to ask you about this next thing because I saw it in the background where I think you were in your home office. So what's up with the wrestling belt I saw behind you?
Yeah. So, I loved pro wrestling as a kid, and it's been really cool being here at North Texas because Stone Cold Steve Austin went to school here, played on the football team. The Von Erich family, two of those brothers, went to school here and played sports here. And so we actually have a connection with pro wrestling. But just growing up in a small town in Oklahoma, we only got two television stations, and those weren't always consistent. And so really, you get like a handful of sports, but it wasn't like it is today where there's college and pro sports on TV all the time. So the most consistent sport show was pro wrestling. My brother's 2 years younger than me. We fell in love with it. Every Saturday morning we would watch it, pull our mattresses out, and wrestle each other and mimic the moves. And so I've always been a fan. Then I worked at the University of Memphis as the deputy athletic director, and had a chance to meet Jerry the King Lawler one day, and offered and asked him if he'd ever come talk to the football team, because Justin Fuente, who's now at Virginia Tech, was the football coach there. He's also in Oklahoma, and he and I were good friends, and he likes pro wrestling. And so Jerry came out, and he gave me that belt, and so it's a prized possession. When I have all of our athletes over the course of a year, and to our house to eat dinner, and it's usually the first thing they go to when they're looking around is they take pictures with it, and it's always a good talking point.
Yeah, it caught my eye for sure. Had to ask. It makes sense. I remember now some of those connections when you mentioned them.
I just, and I also think, pro wrestling, there's a reason why it's kind of consistently, held a passionate, loyal, captive audience. They build storylines, they do different things. And so I think the other just aspect into how I view it is I kind of try to steal a lot of their ideas just in marketing and promotion. I think they do a great job. And when I was in Memphis, the Grizzlies were kind of the hot franchise at the time. They were selling out every night and really raucous crowds. And so I met with their director of marketing and asked him, like, what do you guys, what's kind of, how do you come up with all these ideas? Mm-hmm. And he said, he said, you won't believe this, but we say, what would the WWE do to promote this? And so, I also think that, they've obviously maintained and kept a pretty captive audience for a long time. And
for sure.
I think they do that with some pretty creative promotions and storylines. And not all of it's applicable to college athletics, but we definitely have incorporated some of that.
Yeah. I mean, they're still doing it. Even they're one of these sports that's managed to figure out how to still put a product out there when others right now aren't able to. They're getting creative. I guess they just, like you said, they keep reinventing themselves and putting storylines out there that they're filling up arenas constantly.
No doubt.
Yeah. Okay. So you were the youngest principal in Oklahoma at the time anyway. I don't know if that still holds, at 26 years old. So I'm guessing, would you describe yourself as ambitious and a goal-setting person?
Certainly at that age I was. I think with experience comes not the loss of ambition, but also the understanding that, you can grow where you're planted. And so, but at that age, I definitely was wanting to, move and get as many opportunities as I could. And really what happened there was, again, I go back to, you grew up in a small town, everybody. My high school student council advisor, after I'd left and was in college and working on a master's and all that stuff, I'd always maintained a relationship with her, but she ended up becoming the principal and then the superintendent. And when she became superintendent, it opened up her job, which was a principal's job, and she also had a vacant athletic director position. And so she called me and offered me a job. And it was the first time in my life that I hadn't had to beat my head chasing a job. She just called and offered it to me. And it actually wasn't until probably the fifth or sixth call where I started getting comfortable with the idea of going back home. And, but it was a great learning experience. I really enjoyed the kids. At the time I'm 26, and probably half of the teachers that reported to me were my teachers when I was in school. Wow. So, you talk about doing those evaluations and that kind of stuff. And I had never really spent much time as a classroom teacher. So it was very much a learning and growth opportunity. And I look back and now and realize probably more than I did then, how many lessons I learned during that time.
Wow. Yeah. That would be something to delicately tiptoe through those waters, I'm sure, of managing the team that you were a student of. That's interesting.
It was very, very enlightening and fun. And the reality is when I made that decision, I left Oklahoma State, where I was a member of the basketball staff there for Eddie Sutton, who's a legendary coach. And but I was getting married, and I just felt like I needed to have a more stable life, make a little more money. And so I made that decision kind of with the thought that I was leaving college athletics. And a year later, I got a call and an opportunity to be the AD and head basketball coach at a startup NAIA program at Rogers State. They're Division II now, but at the time they were going to be NAIA. And so, if not for being very fortunate to get that opportunity, I might still be a principal somewhere. So, yeah. It's life presents you with opportunities, and so I had one to go back home, and it was a great job and a great learning experience. But then ultimately, college athletics found me again, and so I ended up transitioning back to college athletics.
Well, let's fast forward to UNT. So last year, the 2018-19 year, was hugely successful for the University of North Texas. And you got there, I think, in 2016 and sort of credited with turning it around, which is a huge accomplishment in itself. But this isn't just turning around like, the football team, for example, or something. We're talking academics and fundraising and attendance, new facilities, media agreements, and other things. But I'm curious, now that you're looking back at, this turnaround you've already managed to do in a pretty quick time frame, what are you most proud of so far at UNT?
Well, I think the first thing that I would just say is, a lot of times, when you're a head coach or an AD or the leader of any organization, you probably get too much blame when things aren't successful and too much credit when they are. Mm-hmm. And so we've been on a heck of a run, but there was so much done in the months and years before I got here by my predecessors and other people in this department at this university that built a solid foundation so that when I came in here, we really could look at elevating the program and what do we need to do to take this to the next level. So I always try and make sure that I take a little bit of an opportunity to give credit. While we've set a lot of records in the last 4 years, I always want to try and give credit to the people before me that did a lot to set the table for that.
Okay. Very good. So knowing that it didn't just happen because you showed up and it happened overnight, then, maybe what also are you most proud of, but what was the most difficult piece to put into play?
I think I'm the most proud of the comprehensive success of our programs. I mean, all of our teams have really been elevated in terms of competitive success and academic success over the last few years. And I think it was 18-19 that you're referring to. For the first time in history, every single team that we fielded had a winning season. And so I think it's just not that, hey, it's one sport or it's just your revenue sports, that we've put a lot of attention and resources and planning and strategies around improving the overall quality of the athletic department and the experience that our student athletes get and the job that we do in helping build them into champions and prepare them as leaders, not just in athletics, but academically and then for the rest of their lives. And so I'm really proud of our coaches and our staff and our student athletes that we have elevated the program comprehensively and not just one or two sports for 1 or 2 years.
Yeah, because some schools are, the football school or the baseball school. So you mentioned comprehensive. I mean, so I said new facilities and media agreements and attendance. None of those can happen independently, really. You're not going to get a good media deal going without people showing up to your games, and then without winning, and then without new facilities and recruiting and all these different pieces, right? So it's all, I am guessing, it all has to work together.
Yeah, I've been doing budget planning the last few days, and it's the first time in my time here that we're having to put together scenarios where some revenue streams may be down due to this pandemic. But as you mentioned, once you kind of have momentum, it's just amazing how much momentum creates momentum and how powerful it is. But at the same time, how fragile it can be. But what we saw was we had some success, and that kind of helped build some revenue, and then we had a little more success, and that gave us a chance to revisit some of our contracts and revisit some of our relationships. And, all of a sudden you look up and, pretty much all of your revenue streams have grown. So we went from, a budget that was maybe 32, 33 million to, 38, 39 million over 3 or 4 years. And, that takes a lot of effort and a lot of work from a lot of people, and probably a little bit of luck as well. But we definitely have seen revenues grow across the board, and that's allowed us to continue to double down on those investments in our student athletes. I mean, you look at, I always bring up one example, but our nutrition budget went from 50 grand to 400 grand. Well, that goes directly into meals and snacks and supplements and that kind of stuff for our student athletes. And obviously that's been something that's been a part of the success of our programs.
Yeah. I mean, every little bit makes a difference. It all can move the needle in some way and ends up, contributing to the overall goal. So those kids you mentioned, so how many sports and how many roughly athletes do you have?
So we have right around 300 athletes in 16 different sports. Now, when I bring that up, track and field, for instance, that we have a men's team and a women's team, and they play they have a fall season and a spring season, and so that counts for 4. And then we have men and women's cross country, which a lot of times they double up and they run distance events at track and field as well. So, that segment of athletes, in some ways, they count for 6 sports, but we have 16, which is the requirement to be in football's highest division, FBS, and about 300 athletes.
300 athletes. That's a lot when you say you eventually get them all over for a family dinner or a dinner at your house.
Yeah. My kids love it. My wife loves the interaction with the players, but definitely it puts a lot of strain on her when we start kicking those off in the fall. But I try and cater the meals, and we have a house that's kind of built for entertaining. It's a lot of the space is in the central area, kitchen, dining room, living room. It's all open, and then that opens onto a patio. So we're able to entertain 35, 40 pretty easily. We can get up to 50. So we knock those out, most of them in the fall. And then what we do is in the spring, we host a big donor event, and that's when we bring football, and we bring in big tents to do that. So, cool. But I think when you're the head of a department like this, and you're reliant on the success of others to kind of help your priorities and initiatives be advanced and your goals be reached, you want to share back with them. And, I'm the one thing I miss most about coaching is not the games or anything like that. I just miss the day-to-day personal interactions with the players. And so it just is a chance for us to do that as a family, and also for my kids who are young, for them to see, like, hey, when Dad's not at our event or our program, or he's not here to put us to bed, it's because he's got to be there for all of these young people. And so that kind of helps them, I think, understand too the magnitude of the job. And they think they think our student athletes are there to play with them. I mean, they immediately grab them by the hand and start leading them off to trampoline or swing set.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So it's a fun experience for my family.
That is cool. So speaking of bringing people into your home, I'm curious, were you as curious as me if you watched the NFL draft to see inside, player homes, sure, but mostly NFL, either coaches' homes or wherever they were doing their picks from?
Yeah, some of them obviously have interior decorators, and some of them obviously don't. So it was pretty pretty curious just to see all of the different surroundings and settings. And I think
You have any favorites? There's been a lot of talk. Coach Bro got a lot of talk, and
he
Jerry got a lot
did.
of talk.
Yeah, obviously, you know what? I love the look of his home, and Arizona is such a great place. Heather and I, we usually go to Phoenix every year, and then we went to Sedona a couple of summers ago and
Love
had
Sedona,
just
yeah.
an absolute blast there. So I'm a big fan of Arizona. But I will say this. My wife, we recently bought some new furniture, and she kind of wanted to go with that modern look that was in Cliff's home there. And I'm all about comfort. And so we have a lot of discussions around that because the chairs that she thinks look good, I think are very inadequate in terms of my comfort.
Right.
So I love the look of his place, but I'm not sure that he looked as comfortable as I would like.
Yeah, there's a commitment level there. You got to commit to that look and just embrace it all the way.
That's right. And he obviously doesn't have the two dogs and two messy kids like I do, because his stuff was all white and looked new. So
right. Yes, there's a chapter in life when you can do that. So talking about those kiddos, so you have two daughters, and I'm curious, as people who work in a higher level sports and athletics, I'm curious how you parent if your kids are athletes. So are they playing sports, your kids?
They do. They're 8 and 5, so it hasn't got to the real competitive place yet. My 5-year-old is kind of a competitor, so she's tended to get in there and mix it up a little more than my 8-year-old, who really just loves the social aspect of it. And, but she's not trying to get in there and fight for the soccer ball or anything. I'm very laid back as a parent. I think just my experience of having spent time in the public schools and then having been in college athletics, I think sometimes as a parent, the worst thing we can do is not just let our kids grow and mature and learn through experiences on their own. We try and interject ourselves in every situation and direct them and coach them and solve the problem for them. I know there's a psychologist that I read a lot, and he says, we do too much preparing the path for the child, not the child for the path. And so I really just kind of back off and stay away from it. And I tell them all the time, if you don't want to play, you don't have to play. Now, if you start a season, you have to finish it.
Right.
But if you don't want to play soccer this year, don't play. If you don't want to play basketball this year, don't play. Now, I let them know if you don't play a season or a year, everybody else that does is gaining an advantage on you. And
right.
It's probably
it might be harder to get back.
That's right.
Where you were.
So I try to educate them on that. And we've had a couple of times where, they had to miss something that they wanted to do because they had a game. And that's the only thing that I'm very strict about with them is you have a team that's dependent on you, and you will be at practice and you will be at games. And it doesn't matter if there's a birthday party that conflicts, you're going to, you have a responsibility to the team
and the coach,
and the coach. But other than that, I don't ever say anything. I never said one word to the coach. I've never yelled at my kid, "Hey, go get the ball. You need to do this." I don't. I feel like there's probably a time and place for that, maybe later in life. But right now, they have a coach, and that coach knows more about coaching that team than I do. He's seen them practice and play more, and so I don't get involved in it too much.
That's refreshing. And even if you do know more than that coach, like if your 8-year-old's on a basketball team and you do know more than what that coach is dealing with, they're the ones who stepped up and volunteered their time to get in there and do it, right? So I always try to remember that. Like, I'm not the one out there coordinating these practices and all the ins and outs. So I'm going to let them do their thing and not try to interject too much.
No question. And my wife, for the most part, is the same, although, I think mothers generally get a little more protective sometimes. But one example I always give, and if my wife hears it, she always gets on me for even bringing it up. But when our 8-year-old was going to start kindergarten at Argyle, which Argyle is a very highly rated public school district in the state of Texas, they they assign them a room temporarily, but they reshuffle the deck after a week because they don't want all the dominant personalities in one room and that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And my wife, my 8-year-old at the time was real introverted and shy, and we had moved a couple of times. She had to change schools, and we were kind of worried about what that had done to her from a social development aspect. And so my wife said, "Hey, I'm going to go up to the school and tell them I really would think they shouldn't change Addison's room after a week because I just don't know how she would adjust to that." And I said, "Heather, based on what your 0 years of teaching experience, I mean, these people do this for a living and they're doing it for a reason. And I'm just a trusting person, like trust the professionals."
Yeah.
So Heather didn't like my initial response to that, but after we talked it through and I went through my logic, she kind of agreed that, we should just hold off on interjecting ourselves in that.
Yeah,
so
it's hard.
That's our approach.
It is hard to let it go, but like you said, you don't want to pave the path so much for her that it's too easy for her to adjust. Like maybe her adjusting it herself is a good life lesson to learn how to adapt to different personalities or change in a classroom or whatever. It's hard though, as a parent, to know when to, keep pushing and when not to.
Yeah, you and I are of the age where we've started to lose loved ones. I still have both my parents, but I've lost all of my grandparents except one. It's like when you lose those people, it's such a kind of a feeling of, really being scared because they've always been there for you. And, if you my grandmother who passed a couple of years ago, like if I was going through a bad time in life or in, at work or whatever, I would go home. She had 80 acres and I'd fish and I'd get on the tractor and, because nothing there ever changed. It was this safety and security. But the reality is, because she didn't always solve all my problems for me, my parents didn't always solve my problems for you, you're equipped to deal with it. So I think sometimes it's really hard as a parent to balance the desire to want to be there for your kids with the natural just battling through adversity that we need as we grow and develop.
Struggles, the pain, letting them feel a little bit of that discomfort or pain to figure something out themselves. Yeah.
No doubt.
Well, I'll be curious as they get older, and because you're like the prime person that would know how to steer them into, that college path to be, I have teenagers, so I have people all around me who they're pretty sure they know how their kid's going to play or get college scholarships. And this has been happening for years. So like at age 10, you start seeing people around here that are pushing their kid on a certain path to college. And it always kind of makes me laugh because who knows if it's going to work or not. But man, you have a perspective where you really could know how to get your kids in the path that you want. So I hope that as they get older, I'm anxious to see how you're able to balance that as a parent.
Yeah, it will be interesting as they get older and things become more competitive if I still am able to have the same approach. But I would like to think that when they need my advice and counsel to pursue their dreams, that I'm able to help them. But I don't ever want them to pursue my dreams for them. Right. I got a chance to live a life and do the things I want to do. And I actually went to college on an academic scholarship, not an athletic scholarship. And so I've got a unique perspective even in that regard. Yeah. I just want them to I want whatever they choose in life, I want them to aspire to be great. And I want them to work hard at it. And I want them to learn that you got to be able to take constructive criticism and battle through adversity. But if that's music or dance or theater or athletics, honestly, it doesn't make me a whole lot of a difference. I get to see a lot of games. I understand the power of athletics in terms of just helping people learn all of those things I just talked about. But athletics isn't the only avenue to learn those things. And so I really just want my two girls to do what makes them happy, but to have the drive to be great at whatever it is that they choose to do.
Well said. That's great. Well, Wren, thank you so much for joining us. Go Mean Green. Gotta say that too. And thank you to everyone listening, and we will see you on the next episode of Hustle and Pro.